The taiga does not forgive mistakes. It makes no exceptions for anyone, neither for inexperienced tourists nor for experienced hunters. I know this as well as anyone. 10 years of service as a gamekeeper in the Ural taiga have taught me to respect its laws. Every day here can be the last, especially when the temperature drops below 40 degrees and a snowstorm covers all traces in a matter of minutes. Many people think that the main danger here is wild animals or the harsh climate, but I know that the taiga holds much more terrible secrets. Secrets that can't always be explained, and one of them almost cost me my life. Before becoming a gamekeeper, I spent 20 years as a tactical shooting instructor. I taught young fighters the art of sniper, passed on to them what I had once learned myself. But time passed, young instructors appeared, and I decided to return to my roots. My father was also a gamekeeper in these parts. I never thought that sniper skills would be useful for me here, in the remote taiga. How wrong I was. It all started on a February morning in 2012. That day forever changed my perception of what the ancient Ural taiga can hide, and the price one sometimes pays for touching its secrets. The message came at 5 in the morning. Victor, the old hunter, had not returned from his rounds of his lands. For a man who knew the taiga like the back of his hand, this was more than strange. In his 68 years of hunting, Victor remained strong and cautious. He had not had a single serious accident in 30 years. The snowstorm that had raged all night had subsided, and the first rays of the sun colored the snow caps of the fir trees pink. The thermometer read -38. I checked my gear, threw my backpack over my shoulders, and headed toward Victor's hunting grounds. The navigator began to malfunction almost as soon as I crossed the Medveji Brook. The compass hand behaved strangely, as if there were a powerful magnetic field source nearby. But here, in the remote taiga, there was no logical explanation for it. I found Victor's footprints 2 hours later. They led to the old adits, abandoned mine workings left here since the last century. The locals usually avoided these places. There were rumors of missing geologists, strange noises at night, and unexplained equipment breakdowns. I never paid much attention to it, writing it all off as common tales. I found the body 300 meters from the entrance to one of the adits. Victor was lying on the snow as if he had laid down to rest. There were no signs of struggle or wild animals. His rucksack was neatly leaned against a tree. His rifle was lying nearby. Everything indicated that death was caused by hypothermia, but it was impossible. An experienced hunter, dressed for the weather, could not just freeze to death a kilometer from his hut. Something was wrong here. I began to scrutinize the scene carefully. Footprints in the snow showed that Victor had been walking in circles for some time, as if looking for something. Then he sat down on a fallen tree, and there was a clear print in the snow. And then the footprints became strange, as if he were staggering. Standing still, he pulled out his compass. There were distinctive footprints in the snow. Looking through his belongings, I noticed some unusual details. His pocket flashlight was completely empty, although Victor always carried spare batteries. In his notebook, which he always carried with him, the last entry was cut off at half a word. A strange rumbling noise from the adit. Compass has gone crazy. Need to check. In his breast pocket was an old photograph, yellowed by time. It showed a group of men in Soviet secret police uniforms standing at the entrance to the adit. On the back was the date, 1920, and some numbers that looked like coordinates. And in his hand, Victor was clutching a compass. The arrow was completely demagnetized and dangled freely. But the strangest find was a small metal object in his pocket. Something like a badge or token with the engraved letters NGCC and a number. The metal was warm to the touch, despite the frost, and also had strange magnetic properties. My own compass started to rotate erratically when I approached it. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning of a story that would stretch for many 7 years and lead to life-changing events. For the next 3 years, I tried to find information about that Soviet secret police expedition. I studied archives, asked old residents, explored the area around the tunnels. I found some scraps of information, old maps, but all this did not add up to a single picture. Until something happened in November 2015 that made me think of Victor's mysterious death. A group of 5 people had registered as a geological expedition. Their paperwork was in order, but something about their behavior was alarming. Too expensive equipment for ordinary geologists, too precise questions about old adits. They camped 2 kilometers from the entrance to the workings and started some measurements. On the 3rd day of their stay, my radio receiver caught a distress signal. Through the interference came an excited voice. "We found..." "Oh my God, it's still working. We need an emergency," and the connection went dead. I immediately went to their camp. What I saw there was unexplainable. The tents were empty, but all the equipment was still in place. In the center of the camp, there was a generator on, appliances running, and hot tea in thermoses. It was as if people had simply vanished in the middle of their work. Only the snow showed tracks leading to the 80. On one of their laptops, its screen blinking haphazardly, I found an open file. It was a photo of the same place as the 1920 photo, only taken recently, and next to it was a schematic of some kind of device labeled Directional Field Generator, Project Compass, Top Secret. The tracks led to the central adit. There was a faint metallic tang in the air, and somewhere in the depths I could hear a low humming sound like a transformer. My flashlight began to flicker as I stepped inside. The adit appeared to be well fortified, despite its age. Fresh fluorescent paint marks were visible on the walls. Soon I found an abandoned tripod and scattered batteries, the first traces of the missing group. In one of the side drifts, I noticed a dim glow. There, leaning against the wall, sat a man. It was one of the geologists, alive, but in a state of deep shock. He kept repeating the same phrase. "It woke up. We woke it up." On the way back, while we were waiting for rescuers, he came to his senses a little. His story was rambling, but some of the details made me chill. They found a room in the back of the adit that looked like a laboratory. There was old equipment, some machinery. One of them was still running, emitting a low humming sound. When they tried to approach it, strange things started happening. All the electronics failed, and then he remembered only the screams of his comrades and some invisible force that pulled them somewhere in the darkness. Rescuers inspected the adit the next day, but found nothing. No people, no equipment, no trace of the lab. Only in one place the Geiger counter showed strange pulses, not like ordinary radiation. And all records from cameras and measuring devices of the missing group were erased. A week later, some men in civilian clothes came to the village. They confiscated all documents related to the incident. And the only survivor disappeared from the hospital without a trace, leaving behind only a piece of paper with the inscription NKGK, exactly the same abbreviation that was on Victor's badge. In October 2016, when the first snow had already covered the taiga, a stranger knocked on my cabin. Tall, gray-haired, in an expensive city coat. He didn't fit into the local landscape at all. He introduced himself as a researcher at the Mining Institute, but his military dressing gave away a very different past. "I know about Victor's case," he said without preamble, "and about the group of geologists, too. You do realize these cases are connected, don't you?" He pulled out a shabby leather folder. Inside were documents labeled Top Secret and the familiar abbreviation NKGK, People's Commissariat of Mining Compasses. In 1920, there was a secret laboratory working here. They created something that wasn't supposed to exist. The equipment is still down there, and it's working again. He placed a photograph on the table. an exact copy of the one I'd found of Victor. "If you help me, I'll tell the whole truth. If not, there will be more victims." I refused. Then he pulled out another document, a report on a special operation in the Caucasus Mountains, 2005. The mission I'd been trying to forget for the past 11 years. A group of militants seized a bus with children. I was ordered to shoot the driver when the bus would pass a dangerous section of a serpentine road. I obeyed the order. The bus was stopped, the children were rescued, but 2 hostages were killed. Officially, it was blamed on the militants, but I knew the truth. It was my last mission. Documents say one thing, but witnesses can tell quite another, he said calmly, especially the relatives of the dead. That same evening I went to see Nick, an old hunter who lived on a distant cordon. He was already in his 70s, but he remained strong and clear-minded. His father, who worked as a forester, was friends with one of the engineers at the lab. Nick said his father had left some papers and diaries. When I pulled up to his hut on the snowmobile, the frosty air already smelled of burning. Flames were shooting out from under the roof. The old hunter was lying unconscious in the snow 50 meters away from the house. Apparently, he had managed to get out. The snow around him had been trampled by several people. I dragged Nick away from the fire and covered him with my jacket. He came to, wheezing, "Iron box, under the floorboards. They didn't find it." And he lost consciousness again. In the burning hut, I found a hiding place. Inside the iron box, yellowed pages of a diary with notes about strange experiments, old schemes of tunnels, and a photo of a group of scientists at some massive device. Inside the iron box, I found yellowed diary pages written in small handwriting. Between the pages were laid schematics of adits and strange readings of devices. And at the very end was a photograph of a group of scientists at the entrance to the main shaft. The inscription on the back read, "Mine number 4th, depth 270 meters. This is where we found it." The last entry in the diary was dated 1921. Today, something happened that I was afraid of. While mining the lower level, we uncovered a massive ore vein. The ordinary instruments are off the scale. It creates some incredibly powerful field. All the iron in a radius of 50 meters is magnetized so that it is impossible to hold in your hands. The military is excited, talking about a new kind of weapon, but they haven't seen what I've seen. People disappearing in the lower tunnels, the way all the gauges are distorted, and those sounds from down there. I took some of the documents and the keys to the lower level. The mine has to be capped. Now, if you're reading this, stay away from mine number 4. What's down there? It's getting stronger. The fire destroyed almost all of Nick's hut, but he survived. In the hospital, when he regained consciousness, he said that 2 men had come to see him shortly before the arson. They were looking for some old key. He didn't know what they were talking about, but now I understood. They were looking for the key to the lower level. When I got home, I found that they were waiting for me. The same man in the coat was sitting at my desk, going through some papers. "So, did you find anything interesting?" he asked without raising his eyes. "You realize you have no choice now, right? Either you work with us, or—" He didn't have time to finish. At that moment, every electrical appliance in the house went off at once. The hand of my compass, which was lying on the windowsill, turned 180 degrees with a whirring sound, and somewhere in the depths of the taiga, away from the old drifts, the sky lit up with a bright flash. November 2019 was unusually cold. A month before, strange things had begun to happen in the taiga. Moose and bears left their habitats en masse. Electronics in the settlement were constantly malfunctioning. And near the old adits, the gamekeepers noticed military equipment more and more often. Officially, it was a training exercise, but I knew they were looking for the entrance to mine number. the one that should have been blocked in 1921. Something had changed down there. Something was gaining strength. First, 2 soldiers from the cordon disappeared. Then a geophysicist from the science team. The military wrote it off as accidents, but I could see the fear in their eyes. The same fear that was in the eyes of that sole surviving geologist in 2015. I started gathering information. I photographed equipment, wrote down license plates, followed the movements of the groups. I kept copies of those old diary documents on a flash drive. I sent all this to the environmental prosecutor's office and to a journalist I know. Let them know where to look if I didn't come back. On the evening of November 20th, my navigator caught a distress signal. The coordinates pointed to the entrance to an old adit. I realized it could be a trap. But if someone really needed help down there were military trucks parked outside the adit. Next to the massive generator, men in hazmat suits bustled about. A man in a coat was saying something to a tall military man with the epaulets of a colonel. I could hear bits and pieces of phrases: critical situation, structural disruption, flooding of the lower levels. Later I found out what had happened. In an attempt to get to that particular ore vein, they started drilling. They opened up an underground aquifer. Water rushed into the old workings, eroding the rock. And this rock, with its high iron ore content, created a powerful magnetic disturbance. All their instruments were reading critical values. 2 rescuers went down to check the water level and didn't make contact. The radio didn't work in such conditions. The iron ore was jamming the signal. I knew another way, through an old ventilation shaft, which was not marked on their maps. Inside the adit, the air was humid, heavy. The sound of the water increased with every meter. At a depth of 200 meters, I found the rescuers. They were trying to make their way to the main shaft, but the water had blocked the passage. One of them injured his leg. While we were climbing up the ventilation shaft, I heard the first cave-in. The groundwater had eroded the supports and the adit began to collapse like a house of cards. We barely made it out in time. An hour later, the entire lower level collapsed. The cavity filled with water, and the whole secret ore story was buried under tons of rock. No one can go down there now, it's too dangerous. The military shut down their work. The man in the overcoat disappeared, and I was reprimanded for interfering with a drill. But the information leaked out anyway. Too many witnesses. The prosecutor's office has launched an investigation into illegal work in the protected area. The compasses here are still showing a hell of a lot of things. But now I know there's no mysticism. Just iron ore, water, and human greed. And those who disappeared down these adits in the 1920s must have faced the same thing. Nature doesn't forgive those who try to take more than they can handle. It's been over a year now. The story of the secret works has been publicized. The investigation revealed violations of environmental laws, and several high officials lost their epaulets. The area around the tunnels was recognized as a danger zone and closed to the public. Nick got better. Sometimes he comes to see me. We drink tea and remember those events. He says that his father was right. Nature keeps some secrets for a reason. I gave the diary and documents to the local history museum. Let people know the history of these places. The man in the coat was never seen again. But sometimes in a snowstorm, I think I hear a rumbling sound from under the ground. It's the water continuing to grind the stone, eroding the old adits deeper and deeper. The locals avoid the place now, not because of mysticism or legends. It's just that everyone realizes that down there, nature has taught us a lesson worth remembering. I still work as a gamekeeper. I go around my property, monitor the forest, help the animals. After that story, the job doesn't seem so boring anymore. Now I know for sure, sometimes the worst secrets are hidden not in legends, but in what people do with nature. Friends, thank you for watching this video to the end. Do you think the object in the depths of the adit was really just a natural phenomenon? Or did the military know something more and tried to cover it up at all costs? What if the experiments of the 1920s never stopped? Perhaps some of you have encountered similar anomalies or heard legends about mysterious places. Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, support the channel by liking and subscribing. And to not miss new mysterious stories, turn on the bell. Take care and remember, the taiga hides a lot. But are you ready to find out the truth? See you in the next issue.